fellow SANS instructor, and just all-around smart guy. New company's Rendition InfoSec. Rendition InfoSec. And Jake is going to be telling us how to spy on employees using memory forensics. So with that, welcome Jake Williams.
I want to make sure, oh yeah, that's good, that sounds great. So, okay, so Mark gave me an outstanding introduction, but of course, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Mark and Lawrence and all the great folks that put this on. Really appreciate their great effort. So I apologize for going barefoot here. It's raining cats and dogs on Fort Gordon. I just wrapped up SANS class, stepped out right into a giant puddle, and thought about speaking for the next hour in soggy shoes. And I thought, you know what? This is family. It's BSides. I don't know how to pull this off at Black Hat or DEF CON, right? Somebody'd steal my shoes if we're Black Hat or DEF CON, right? But I figured BSides Augusta, worst case, I'll tomboy it back to the house. So again, Jake Williams, Malware Jake on Twitter. I occasionally even tweet out stuff about memory forensics. I know this is the red team track, right? I know what you're thinking. Why is there a forensics talk in the red team track? Well, I want to tell you that I started out, I think, in the blue team track, and then got shifted over to the red team track. But that's okay. We'll talk about how to use this offensively, right? Let's suppose that I work for this little, what we call them, a little three-letter agency. They go to church all the time. We'll call them Christians in Action. Let's say that we work for this little agency called Christians in Action, and this agency, despite what the name might imply, might desire to coerce certain people. Maybe then we could use this in an offensive fashion. No joke though. During my pen test, I regularly use memory forensics to pull out pieces of data that a lot of folks just don't think are there. So we're able to pull stuff out of hibernation files. Those hibernation files get back to the volume shadow copy. What's not to like, right? So who am I? That's all that. You don't care, right? Oh, but I am hiring. So if you're an InfoSec and you're looking to make a move, and here's the key, this is where I lose like 90% of people, and you're willing to travel, right? And you're willing to travel, come talk to me afterwards, because again, I am definitely hiring. And if you're not interested in that, I'm looking for interns. So take your pick, right? In any case, come talk to me after the presentation. I'll be more than happy to talk to you. So memory forensics in real life. But the number one problem that we have traditionally with memory forensics, be it blue team, be it red team, is getting somebody to take the memory image. Right? This is unfortunate because for the longest time we had folks in law enforcement and folks in incident response, and what do they say? Right? Pull the plug, right? Pull the plug. And even now, right, I get managers who are like, we can't leave that machine on the network. Pull the plug, right? You take nothing else away from this. Don't pull the plug. Go hibernate the doggone machine, right? At a minimum. Well, okay, first, don't pull the plug, take a memory image. But if they say it's got to go offline right now, hibernate the machine. At least the hibernation file is a memory image unto itself, and we have to love that. We can crash dump files as well, right? So there's an offensive use here as well as a defensive use. Right? A lot of times when I find my rootkit folks loading up their wares into memory, it turns out they screw it up. Right? What's Dr. Watson in kernel space? Blue screen adapt, right? Or if you're on Windows 8, the purple frowny face, right? Because we had to recolor it. It's a purple frowny face. But we can turn those crash dumps, right? We can turn those crash dumps into evidence as well. And there's an amazing amount of evidence actually placed inside of a crash dump. Right? So obviously, if we get a full memory dump, rock on, right? If we can do a live, some type of live audit, again, if you're there pen testing, you're going to be able to do a live audit. You should do just that, right? Again, all kinds of stuff we can pull out of memory. Right? So again, how do you prep to do this? If you're spying on your employees, because again, the original push on this, I can swear I was in the blue team track when I submitted this, but again, we don't care, right? Blue team, red team, whatever. Walk away understanding the power of forensics here. And again, possibly for offensive and coercive purposes. But look, first thing we want to do in this case is enable hibernation of our workstations. Laptops, hibernation always on, right? Very frequently, hibernation is not on our desktop machines. I'm going to tell you, hibernation files have pulled my butt out of a sling more times, right? More times than I can remember over the last 2 years. Going back into a volume shadow copy, right? How do we do that? Well, Mr. Tim Tomes, where's Tim moved to? He just left. He's like, F this, man, I'm out, right? So Tim Tomes, right, and Mark Baggett, who introduced me here a minute ago, wrote bssown.vbs, right? Phenomenal little piece of Visual Basic script that will help you jump into a volume shadow copy if you're too lazy to do it manually, right? And so we can also configure the power settings to automatically hibernate the machine when it goes idle, right? This ensures a steady state of hibernation files. Very frequently, as I'm doing investigations, or when I jump on a box during a pen test, I find out that the hibernation files are actually being backed up into the volume shadow copy, and I've got 6, 7, 8, 10 of these things that I can go parse through. Doing a pen test about 4 months ago, jumped onto a box, lo and behold, right? This company had taken a policy of making sure that all of their machines, right, after they had logged into them with administrative credentials, that they would reboot the machine. Right? So no administrative credentials there, but wanted the volume shadow copy, and sure enough, there's an admin logged in, right? Admin logged in, and that was cool. It was from 2 weeks ago, and so use Mimikatz offline mode. And Mimikatz, by the way, has a Windows debugger extension, so we can use an offline mode. Also, there's been a Volatility plugin written for this, and so we're able to use this in offline mode without pulling this 3 gig memory image back. I made the box do all the processing work for me, and went ahead, not that it's that much, right? And went ahead and pulled out that plain text password from the administrator, the main administrator, who had logged into the machine, right? And so again, it's got stuck in the hibernation file. It wasn't that the admin was still logged in, right? But the fact of the matter was the admin had logged in and we're set to go, right? Okay, so what are we going to look for when we start getting into let's suppose we're going to come back into the coercion thing, because it's going to make it flow a heck of a lot better. Coercion, or maybe we just want to fire an employee, nail the butt to the wall, right? I want to look for, like, what are they running, right? Maybe they have some chat program fragments. I love it when folks tell me that we're safe because we're chatting off the record. I love that, right? Right? It's encrypted and it's off the record. It's not being saved anywhere. I'm like, you don't understand how memory works. Reboot your machine. As a matter of fact, pull the plug on your machine, right? When we're done with this little chat. Not that I've ever done anything illegal or incriminating, right? Since I'm sure I'm being recorded here somewhere, right? Okay, but active and terminated network connections. This is a big boon for us as well, right? You may think you got in and you got out and nobody noticed you and you're set to go, but those terminated network connections hang out in memory. We can find those as well. Encryption software, man, this one is totally for the win. You know that nice BitLocker to go thumb drive that you plugged in and was mounted, and then you had to jump on the plane, so you close the laptop. Now that key is stuck in the hibernation file. We can pull that out of memory and decrypt that USB drive offline, right? We now have the keys to do that. And it's not just BitLocker to go. I don't want to just pick on Microsoft. They deserve it. But, right, TrueCrypt as well, right? Who in here is still using TrueCrypt? That's okay, you don't have to admit it. I wouldn't either, right? Okay, so seriously, if you're using TrueCrypt, go. BitLocker is definitely the way to go. So we want to look for evidence of execution, right? File knowledge artifacts and internet browsing history. You know, I got to tell you, number six has got to be the biggest one, right? Because this is the only one up here that passes the mom test. Is anybody familiar with the mom test? The mom test is whether or not Jake's mom knows about it, right? And so Jake's mom actually knows about private browsing, right? And asked me, just how private is it? And just how private is your private browsing? Well, it's all recorded in memory, right? All recorded in memory, even if it's not written back to disk. So even after you close the browser, again, all still present, right? If my mom knows about it, your adversaries know about it too, and you better believe that they're using it, right? Let's look at an acceptable use policy violation, right? So we've got, this is a fairly common one. We've got a user who decides that, you know, they really like that music, but it is kind of expensive, and clearly we're not paying them enough. Well, we know what needs to happen here. Clearly the only answer is peer-to-peer, right? Peer-to-peer file sharing. We see in this case, or we suspect in this case, that our user is running peer-to-peer file sharing. We're told to go remotely acquire a memory image. So whether we do that with NCase Enterprise or whether we go acquire physically walk over to the machine and acquire covertly at night while the employee isn't there, doesn't really matter. Right? We want to find out what's being downloaded, prove first off that the user actually had knowledge of this, and then prove indeed that the user is downloading, is complicit in downloading these programs with peer-to-peer. Right? So what do we want to do? Well, the first thing we're going to look at is potentially finding out information about the image, right? What's the operating system? What's the kernel version? Any service packs in play? And we want to find out potentially the image copy plugin. This is all going to be done with Volatility initially. We might use the image copy plugin to convert from a hibernation file to a raw memory format. Because, well, let's be fair, right? There are way too many tools that accept raw memory formats. With raw memory, we can string search that. As a matter of fact, if you're not familiar with Bulk Extractor, you're missing out, all right? Bulk Extractor is this awesome program written by a guy named Simon Garfinkel. And every time I hear the guy's name, I always think about some guy playing in some folksy band, right? But the guy is a brilliant computer scientist, right? One of the many things that he knows how to do, or that he's written into this tool, is the ability to extract packets right back out of memory. Right? Packets out of memory. He can pull packets out of a page file, right? So this is stuff that's actually getting sent into the kernel pool. It turns out then that we can actually get a PCAP file. Picture the power of this, by the way, right? Being able to get a PCAP file of things that happen on a box, but you didn't really run TCP up there to grab it. I mean, that's awesome. That's one of those things that I feel all warm and fuzzy inside every time I think about it, right? Okay, so we also want to look for a process listing. I'm all about that, right? But oftentimes I want to find out what did the user do before I got there. Well, this turns out we can find terminated processes sometimes as well. Let's take a look at how this plays out with our core user here. We go ahead and convert his hibernation file. Go ahead and convert that out to a raw memory dump so we can process it with some other stuff, right? Because I'm way too lazy to just use volatility only for this investigation. And we see here that service pack 1. You know, sometimes here when we ask for the image information, sometimes we get some really weird, several different results. But this thing down here, the service pack, this is always ground truth, right? So again, this is kind of a pattern matching deal, and then the service pack's always ground truth. It turns out that whether you're using Server 2008 or Windows 7, it's all the same kernel. Honey Badger don't care, right? Okay, so start walking the process list, right? What do we find? Emule is running. Well, look. That's good. I feel like I can nail the user to the wall, because let's be honest, that's what I want to do. I want to nail them to the wall. But you know the problem with this? The problem is Sogdy, right? Sogdy is the only person with more frequent flyer miles than me, right? Sogdy, and I know this because Sogdy shows up at every one of my cases before I get there. Has anyone ever met Sogdy in real life? Nobody's familiar with Sogdy? Are you kidding me? Sogdy stands for some other guy did it. Right? And he shows up at every one of my cases. It wasn't me, it was clearly Sogdy, right? So we're stuck now, we've got Emule running there. We're stuck now proving that it wasn't Sogdy, that it was the user and not Sogdy. So we see the Emule process. Let's see if we can push on there. When was the process launched? Who owns it, right? What files is the given process accessing? And then we want to look at network connections as well. I got a tool from Redline here. Now, this is a Mandiant tool. I know Mandiant helped a little. Mandiant and FireEye, of course, definitely help out the community here. They distribute a lot of free tools. Their licensing is a little restrictive, though, right? So they're free, but they're not free to me, because I'm a consultant. And if you're a consultant, they're not free to you either. Turns out that Mandiant and FireEye have a professional services division, and they don't really want you to compete with them. So not using their own tools anyway. Right? So you're free to use Redline, providing you use it on your own cases, right? But as a consultant, you can't use it on somebody else's cases. But that's okay. This is just a demonstration. We're able, in this case, to enumerate the security ID, right? The security ID of the user. And we can now tie this back to a local user logging on the machine. This certainly looks like our user. We can certainly confirm that via some registry analysis.
So you both use the Redline on the memory image to do that?
Absolutely, yeah. And so we were able to do that because we took the hibernation file and we used volatility to convert the hibernation file to a raw memory image. By default, Redline doesn't understand how to use the hibernation, or how to read a hibernation file. So we have a good idea now that there are active downloads processing, right? We also can see that our suspect, we have the right machine. I'll screw that one up, right? They have the right machine is Mark Lucas. The user Mark Lucas, our suspect, is logged on. So we see multiple parts here, multiple parts of these files. We don't really know, I don't really understand what those files might be. I do have a good directory, though, that I want to go check, that downloads Emule temp directory for some of my partial downloads. I also now am kind of thinking about maybe downloads Emule might have the full, right? Might have the full files when they get completed. I might do a little search within the strings here. Maybe look for downloads Emule, right? And it turns out that this user is pirating Ed Sheeran music, right? I don't have many teenage girls in the audience, so I'm guessing nobody knows who Ed Sheeran is. It's okay, right? So if you have a teenage girl, you'll know who Ed Sheeran is. Anyway, right? So we see indeed some of these, and they're in the incoming directory. Now we have to test to make sure that the incoming directory really means incoming, but okay, let's call a spade here, right? What about networking connections? Because the user might say, well, that looks bad, but I put those files there, and I named. If you think that sounds ridiculous, you haven't worked some of the cases I've worked, because believe me, the kind of stuff that people try to pull when their jobs and/or freedom are on the line is absolutely off the hook, right? Okay, so in this case here, we see some closed weight, meaning these are connections that are actually closed out. They're no longer present. We can see the remote server, right? So we might go look up that remote server to see if it's associated with our emule activity. And it turns out here we see that the process is actually emule.exe. So it sure does look like that's going to be some of our file downloads. Again, of course, we can run that to ground. What about this? Snippingtool.e. Well, that got cut off, right? Because there's only 15 characters available there. It's really snippingtool.exe. Has anyone ever used Snipping Tool? Yeah. What does that do? Screenshots. Why do we care about screenshots? Yeah, there's all kinds of reasons we could use a screenshot, right? What's the big threat, right? I've actually have a giveaway here. Somebody tell me what the big threat is that we deal with Snipping Tool. Data exfiltration, right? Give that man I don't even know what this is. I believe a Raspberry Pi, courtesy of Rural Technology Fund. Good job. You're a hacker, no less. Congrats, sir. See the nice hacker patch there. That's awesome, right? DLP, right? I work tons of DLP incidents, right? Tons of DLP incidents involving folks exfiltrating data using images, right? Whereas most of our DLP software doesn't have any optical character recognition. So they ship the same data out, right? Instead of shipping the Word document out, they take a picture of the Word document, a screenshot of the Word document, and ship that away. Better believe we're going to add this to our list of stuff to follow up on. Right? What about bulk extractor, right? So in this case, what we're looking at is we're actually going to use bulk extractor, and we're giving it the word list. I love this feature because bulk extractor will go through and build a list of unique words, grabbing all of the ASCII string, or all of the ASCII strings, as well as all of the Unicode strings, and create a word list that we can then use with offline password cracking. Now, I don't care what your password manager told you. I mean, I don't care what your password manager told you about the fact that your passwords are never anywhere in memory. They lied to you, right? Don't worry, we zero them out. Okay, well, you do a best effort, right? None of these password managers that all run user space have anything to do with the kernel space activities that are going on. While Windows in the background moves that memory around, we find passwords all the time, right? Now, unfortunately, they're not labeled passwords. Right? But by giving us the word list option, we get a full word list, and now I have a good idea of where to start. I can remove all the common things that are normal for a given Windows 7 image, right? And then we can move forward with looking for things that are unique to a particular user, right? What else can we look for? I want to point out here that the presence of an artifact in memory does not necessarily guarantee the user typed it or even that the user saw it, right? So. And I've been harping on this for years. I've been doing memory forensics since before memory forensics was cool. Some of you know me, my days going back to good old H.B. Gary. How many folks have heard of H.B. Gary? How many folks have heard of H.B. Gary before they got hacked? Yeah, see, that's really, now, I have to tell you that I was not in charge of security or did anything with security at H.B. Gary. I simply did malware reverse engineering and built most of their courseware for their memory forensics and malware reversing. But we used to tell folks this. We're like, look, you know, our product would actually go pull out URLs from memory, and we tell people, be very careful. Whatever URLs you see here do not necessarily indicate that the user actually went to the URL or even visited it or typed it or anything. There's all kinds of explanations. I had an interesting consulting call about 6 months after I taught a gentleman's class, and they sent us a memory image, and they're like, dude, this guy's been looking at all kinds of porn. And I'm like, okay, cool. And like, we have at least 10 porn sites, right? And then I get a follow-up email as the image is copying up to our server. Right? We've got like 100 porn sites. I'm like, wow, man, this guy's busy on a work computer? Seriously? Right? I'm like, wow. You have him like in like a corner office way back, like through a locked door, no windows kind of thing. Right? By the time the memory image is done uploading, because I'm waiting for the thing to upload, they're like, there's more than 500 porn sites. And I'm like, this is unrealistic by any expectation of, right? So we take a look at it. It turns out that a antivirus product, right, an antivirus product who I won't name McAfee, that was there had loaded the entire blacklist of URLs, right, that it didn't want people to look at into memory. And so these folks now are looking at these URLs and like, this guy, I mean, anybody, Ray Charles could have seen this one coming, right? Looking in memory, because they were all like one after another. They're separated by, by some string separator. I think it was like, I don't know, F delta or something, whatever it was. It wasn't, I mean, it was fairly obvious what was going on, except not to these folks, right? So I want to highlight again, even though I said it, I dedicate a whole slide to it. It doesn't mean when you see it that the user saw it or that the user even typed it. But hey, you know what? Let's take a look at this. So we're able now to search for keywords. This is a neat little tool called Bulk Extractor Viewer. It'll actually go in and view. The cool thing about Bulk Extractor, I'm a command line junkie. Absolute command line junkie. If you see me in a GUI, there's a reason for it, right? Bulk Extractor Viewer will now go and parse those files. Has the convenience of having a hex editor that vectors you into, right? Vectors you right into the memory image or disk image, or doesn't even matter what it is. Bulk Extractor doesn't care, right? But it'll vector you right into that. And we search for Sharan because, well, we saw the user downloading Sharan, and now we're finding new songs that we didn't previously know about. So we found additional evidence here. And for those who aren't aware, this file 0 here is actually an NTFS file header, right? So this would be out of the master file table, right? So now we're actually backing up. What does this indicate? Maybe the whole master file table is loaded into memory. Okay, well that's good to know as well, right? So we can take a memory image, right? We can take a memory image and actually use that memory image to enumerate all of the files on the user's machine. Yeah, I think that's useful, at least on their root drive, right? And any other drives that are mapped. Sir?
What about the case of an EFS folder?
An EFS. So the case of an EFS folder, that's an excellent question. It turns out you'll still be able to list the contents of it, providing that the user has entered the EFS key, right? So essentially, what you're looking at there is providing it's been opened in memory, you'll still be able to see that data. If the machine hasn't been booted, if the user hasn't entered their EFS key, if it's a manual process, if they haven't entered their EFS key since the time the machine was booted, then you won't be able to see the contents. So in this case, of course, we're not seeing the file contents necessarily. We're simply in this case able to see the actual file record. But that's still something. I'm liking this again a whole lot more here. Turns out again, the bulk extractor is pulling packets out, right? And now we're able to actually go look at some of that traffic. Remember we saw the closed network connections? And of course, when some other guy did it, we have to be sure about this, right? How many folks are running dedicated packet capture at your peripheral? Yeah, like 1 or 2 folks at the network boundary. Start. Go buy a cheap server and just start doing it. There's a tool for that. It sounds like is it Security Apple or no, Security Onion? That's it. That you can use for free. All you need is a cheap server off of eBay or a cheap workstation, honestly, that you're getting ready to rotate out of service, right? Something is better than nothing, right? Even if you have a 1-day spool, if you have a 12-hour spool, again, that's better than nothing, right? But that's okay. Again, we can pull packets out of the traffic as well. That certainly helps. We can actually go in and look. Right? We can actually go in and look at the packets here. We did the follow TCP stream. We see the URL. Yep, that's an email update server. Right? Again, all of the evidence is coming together. Not looking very good for the user. Turns out we can look at URL searches here. Right? It turns out that we see a search in Bing for eDonkey. Now, this is where you know for sure that this particular scenario is contrived, because nobody uses Bing. Okay, so we can even go a little bit further. We can parse the IE history, the Internet Explorer history, and go find URLs visited by the user. Again, I want to point out that we're not grabbing all the files on the disk, we're grabbing memory. All right, so again, think about the power of this, right? Again, we're parsing all this stuff out using, in most cases here, a single tool, Volatility. Although I have to put in a plug for Recall, which is a fork of Volatility that I'm actively involved in now. It's going to surpass, I'm positive will surpass where Volatility was at. You may have known Michael Cohen, a very, very smart guy that works for Google. He had been working on what they call the Volatility Technology Preview branch, or some folks knew it as the Scudet branch. Scudet is his handle. And when it was clear that that was never going to be reintegrated into Volatility, he broke that off last December and officially forked the project. And so Recall is pushing forward. We're working to make it bigger, badder, and faster. Most importantly, faster and more flexible. But in this case here, again, we see the parsing out. We have the same evidence, just pulled from a different angle. Here we're doing it off of the command line with Volatility. Here we had it in bulk extractor viewer. I'll take it either way, right? So what about registry analysis? It turns out our registry hives are mapped into memory as well. So what do we want to look at? Well, you know, this really makes my system triage, when you think about this, it's faster. You don't have to do hard drive imaging. Right? I regularly tell people, from a forensics standpoint, right, I'm done with my investigation before you finish imaging the drive. It's just a reality, right? I mean, it is that quick. And if you think about this, particularly when we're trying to get law enforcement, how many folks are law enforcement? Anybody? And we're trying to get like law enforcement to, to go grab, seize evidence. You know, we tell them we need like 12 different things. I much prefer to tell somebody I need one thing, right? I need one thing. Press the button, get this one thing, and hand it over to me. And whether it's law enforcement, whether it's help desk, right? Whether it's our tier 2 or whatever it is, systems administrators, they just need the one thing, right? It makes it just that easy. Keys, subkeys, and values, it says can be cached, but most of the time are indeed cached in memory because they're being actively used by the system, right? So maybe I want to look at my shim cache. Is anybody familiar with shim cache? So Mark Baggett actually did a presentation last year at DerbyCon called Owned by Default. It's called Owned by Default, and he talked about the built-in Microsoft rootkit, right? So Windows, since XP, has actually included a rootkit with every copy, pre-installed, always loaded, right, with every copy of Windows. In fact, he contacted Microsoft. He even talked to Mark Rusinovich of SysInternals fame and said, how do I turn this off? And I said, you can't, right? There's no way to get it out, right? You break the system. And so basically what's happening here with this shim cache is so that you can have application compatibility, and some folks refer to this as app compat, right? So you can have application compatibility, you essentially build these shims. And those shims then will automatically load special DLLs into whatever process you tell it needs a shim. Well, because processes may need shims, Windows actually checks to see if those things need shims and builds a cache of the shims required for each executable executed on the system. This is good news for us, because now we have another place to go to see if an attacker, right, or my suspect, right, executed something on a machine, right? I've been seeing some of my, I'm just going to call them my little Chinese friends, right? I've been seeing them recently as they execute stuff on machines, actually deleting other evidence of execution, but for whatever reason, I think it's because they don't know about this. I hope they're not watching the presentation. It turns out that they forget about these in these registry keys. Now, if you do a plain text search through the registry, these are kind of hard to find. You end up having to decode these, right? So that's okay. Again, we know how to do it. It's as simple as running the command on the screen. Right? So shim cache shows us indeed, in this case, that Emule was executed. And we're able to identify precisely when that was first executed. So we can even go a little bit farther, and we can say that Mark Lucas on January 24th, 2014, executed the installer out of their home directory. So I'm going to go ahead and ratchet this up from somebody else did it, right on to probably Mark Lucas. I feel like I have enough to nail Mark to the wall at this point, but why stop there, right? So maybe we want to go look at shell bags, right? Windows spies on everything you do. You open up a folder in Explorer, and you go look at files. The actual names of the files that you look at inside of the folder, even if they're EFS, even if they're TrueCrypt, even if they're BitLocker, get reported, right? Now this is somewhat non-deterministic. Shim cache, 100% deterministic. Shell bags, not 100% deterministic, right? So it doesn't always show up, but that's okay. Again, when it does, couldn't be any happier. We're able to look at some of the files included inside of particular folders, right? And so that's good, right? Then we actually parse through the MFT, pull the MFT out of memory, and go look for some of our creation times, again, to get an idea of when precisely Mark Lucas did something dumb like install peer-to-peer file sharing software on a corporate machine, right? So we have evidence of Emule executables. We have lots of cool user behaviors. We saw snipping tool. Don't want to forget about that because that's a possible DLP issue, right? If not, I'm dying to know what Mark was snipping, right? Let's talk about another bad user, right? I like this one way better. Henry. Henry is an evil insider, right? He hibernated his laptop. We have his memory images at this point from that hibernated laptop. We need to know whether or not Henry was trying to do something stupid like steal our corporate secrets, right? And you guys are going to laugh at this case, right? I created this, probably, it was in April. It was in April. 2 weeks ago, I worked this case, right? 2 weeks ago, I worked this case for real, except the guy's name wasn't Henry. And I mean, almost verbatim, about half of the evidence in here actually lines up, and it is every bit that stupid, right? So let's walk through this, right? So we open up, we look at the process list, and I see Notepad. I mean, nobody uses Notepad. Come on, man, right? Not my end users. I know my admins do, right? But you use Notepad++, right? Not really. Who said hey? Who said hey like you actually use Notepad? I want to introduce you to Notepad++ so we can move on. Okay, so anyway, right, it is clearly superior replacement. We have a user with a command prompt open. This immediately makes me suspicious as well, and tons of browsers. And I have to suspect that these browsers are, one or more of these browsers are in private browsing mode. Now, I don't know if you've ever had to explain something to a jury before. Anybody in here ever been deposed, besides my law enforcement friend? Anybody in here ever been deposed before? Okay, well, so depositions are awesome, but jury testimony is even cooler. And this is not to knock the criminal justice system or the jury selection process. And if one of you fine folks has served on a jury, thank you for doing your civic duty. However, pause for effect, a jury of 12 people are not a jury of your peers. Right? The reality is, I'm guessing that the jury of 12 people that we would see assembled for a trial are 12 people who find nothing better to do and have no excuse to get out of jury duty. Right? I mean, that's the reality. And you go try to explain something, and I'm not knocking this, right? But the reality is you go try and explain something to these folks about technical concepts, and it is very difficult to do. And now I'm trying to explain about memory forensics. Disk forensics is hard enough, for crying out loud. It's at least deterministic. Memory forensics is non-deterministic. I can take a memory capture, I cannot do anything on the machine, and I can immediately take another memory capture, and I don't get the same memory capture because the machine kept running. Right? So this becomes difficult, right? People don't like processes that aren't repeatable. It feels very fuzzy. Right? It's difficult to explain to them, and then I introduce a screenshot. Right? Now, this isn't a traditional screenshot, it's just a wireframe screenshot. We're going back into the graphical display subsystem, right? Going back into the graphical display subsystem, saying, where are all the windows positioned, how are they aligned, and what was the window text associated with them, right? This is better than nothing, and this is something that you can put in front of a jury that makes sense. And I feel like I can put this in front of a jury and be okay, right? Because it turns out that our user works for Better Widgets, and he has our competitor's web page open in Internet Explorer. And that by itself isn't bad. Okay, well, it's kind of bad, but it's not 100% damning. But then this, the Google search, right? Corporate espionage for dummies, how to post stolen data on Pastebin. And this is the part of the case that I kid you not, right? I kid you not, I worked 2 weeks ago, right? Worked 2 weeks ago where I had a user Googling for from the corporate network, Googling for instructions on how to conduct corporate espionage. And you can go ahead and say, right, that the gene pool there was about 3 inches deep, right? But regardless, right, this stuff happens, right? Okay, well, we see something here with Henry, and we see stolen credit. I don't know what the rest of that is. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue on here. We see several closed network connections. I'm scanning through memory, looking for network connections. We find some closed connections. But I'm going to look at these IPs. Here I'm using Bulk Extractor. We've located credit card numbers, and in fact, I didn't have to go search for these. Bulk Extractor highlighted them for me and said, hey, we found a bunch of credit card numbers. Go check those out. And when we do, we see that it looks like we have some HTML dumps here of credit cards and addresses and passwords, and this looks all kinds of bad. This is classic corporate espionage, right? Looks kind of bad, right? Already, I'm thinking that this guy's bad, but then we go look at the URLs, right? We go look at our searches, and we see selling confidential information to the highest bidder. My user 2 weeks ago was not quite that stupid. They weren't worried about the actual bid prices of they already knew who they were going to go sell the information to. So they weren't worried about the bidding. They were curious about how to get it out, and how to get it out without being caught, right? You want to talk about sealing intent and nailing somebody's butt to a wall? That's a great way to do it, right? It's like, look, you search for how to do it without getting caught, for crying out loud. I think we're set, right? Anyway, so how to sell the confidential information to the highest bidder. Selling confidential information, again, Ray Charles can see what's going on here. Let's go fire the guy, right? So we look at the command.exe. Remember we had a command.exe process running, and even if that command's been terminated, we still have the opportunity to go parse through memory and find the data structures associated with that command prompt. Now, some folks will remember the good old days of DOS key. Okay, actually, I'm looking around here, and I think maybe like 4 or 5 people in the room are old enough to remember that. But that's okay, right? It's okay. In the current Windows command prompt, though, you know that you can up arrow. Some people know that you can F7, right, and see the list of commands that are there. That has to be stored in memory somewhere. Turns out we can go find that and parse it out. But wait, there's more, right? It turns out that remember when you right-click inside the command prompt and ask how many lines of scroll back you want? Yeah, it's doing that so it can allocate enough memory to store all of those lines of scroll back, and it turns out that we can pull those out as well, right? I really like it when my admins, right, when it's one of my admins that I'm investigating, because by default I only get 300 lines of scroll back, right? With an admin it's always 9999, right? So you get a lot more evidence there, right, from your admins than you do from a regular user. I'll take what I can get, right? So we can see.
Scroll back to 1.
What's that? Oh, set the scroll, yeah. Note to self, set scroll back to 1, exactly, right? Unfortunately, then you can't see anything in your command prompt either, but hey, whatever. I mean, usability, who cares, right? Okay, so our hapless user here pops open a command prompt, says post data to paste in and post secrets to text. Now look, this guy's a total paste eater, right? He licked the window on the way over to work this morning, but hey, right? Clearly, all right? Clearly, though, this definitely seals intent, and I don't know for sure that there's not a post.exe, right? If there's a post.exe on the machine, this command may well have succeeded. I don't know what's in secrets.txt, although I'm guessing probably that giant credit card address, password, etc. dump that was there, right? Again, I'm going to follow up and make sure that that's not totally there's no post.exe. We can parse out again ultimately the command history. By the way, here. Now that we're seeing the consoles, right, we see without any shadow of a doubt, again, it is in Henry's home directory. Right? We can pull out the SID associated with the command prompt because this one happens to still be running. But bear in mind, there are times where we're going to pull this data out and the command prompt is going to have already exited. Right? Well, this is unfortunate for us because now we're not necessarily going to know who owned the command prompt, but we can still go back and grab the data. I'm liking that. So, what about contacts, right? So we looked at bulk extractor, and we're looking for email addresses and Facebook IDs. Dead end, right? Bulk extractor actually pulls these out, right? What about Twitter? Well, unfortunately, there's no bulk extractor plugin for Twitter yet. One of you could write one, right? Or maybe I'll write one. It's hard to say, right? In any case, it doesn't automatically come out and say, here's Twitter. But it turns out strings come to the rescue, right? So I'm going to look for HTTP. I'm going to look for Twitter. I'm looking for Twitter links, like embedded Twitter links, because if you go on Twitter and you actually look at the Twitter webpage, all those tweets that you look at are all links, right? They all are embedded with links and may show me who your contacts are, who your private messaging or DMing on Twitter. Let's look at that, right? So in this case, I see that I've got 1,537 entries. Okay, I like that, right? I want to make sure that we're looking for Unicode and ASCII. Very, very often, folks forget, right? Folks forget about Unicode and ASCII. Unfortunately, Windows, under the hood, does everything in Unicode. Everything in Unicode. If you simply run strings on a Linux machine, you only get ASCII. Right? So there's an encoding L, strings minus EL, will actually give you all of the Unicode strings. You want to make sure that you examine both. Right? Well, in this case, we've examined both, and we're looking at 1,500 entries. I can manually examine those. I might do some grep foo if we're too many more than that. We take a look there. Unfortunately, I'm stuck up there someplace. That kind of sucks, right? So I actually did not pre-populate that. As I was doing the examination, I'm like, great, right? So we created the memory image, and anyway, I got stuck there. So, but we look at this Lenny Zeltzer guy, and it turns out he's in the image too, right? Lenny's actually my co-author on the SANS malware reverse engineering course. All around great guy. Now I'm thinking that Henry actually knows or follows Lenny. Lenny might be a person of interest. So we start doing a little bit of grep foo in this case, right? We're looking to see maybe do we have any status updates, right? We do some grep foo, and we decide to go ahead and get rid of Lenny, right? And this is all we've got left. And so not a lot, right? So there's a lot of Lenny and not a lot else, right? So 927 entries. total and 9 without Lenny's name in them. I'm thinking he and Lenny are like this, right? These guys are now collaborators, right? And this is not looking good, right? I don't want to get sued by Lenny, by the way, so this is just a fabrication, right? Well, you know, our job as investigators, when we're doing an investigation, right? Or if you're into that Christians in Action group and you're trying to coerce somebody with like fake evidence or something, whatever the case is, right? Well, in this case, it wouldn't be fake. This is real evidence, right? You want to make sure that you've covered all of your bases, right? Because we don't want to walk up and try and leverage them with Lenny and find out that that's not going to work out very well. Well, it turns out, and I don't know how Lenny has such awesome SEO, but when you Google how to post stolen data on Pastebin, I kid you not, Lenny comes up, he is the #1 search result. And I have got to figure out, I have to figure out how to get some awesome SEO like that for some really good black hat activities, right? You know, like, for instance, I don't know, how to hide a body, right? Don't you want to be #1 for that? I mean, no, sure enough, when you Google how to post stolen data on Pastebin, Lenny's site actually pops up #1. So it's awesome SEO explains this. We can actually exclude him as a person of interest. We go investigate the page and we find out he embeds his Twitter feed. In his web page. That now explains the 920 some odd entries that we saw. So we'll exclude him as a person of interest. How about the notepad? Well, it turns out that we can actually dump the memory, all of the memory from the notepad.exe, and we can confirm that those credit card numbers that we saw earlier are actually open inside of the notepad.exe. I've been running an experiment recently. Is this being videoed and distributed?
Yes.
What do you think?
Xbox pause.
Can you pause it?
I can't pause it. I can stop it, though.
Oh, fail. I'm going to hit this after. What's that? What do you think after the talk? Yeah, we'll do it after the talk, but remind me. So, please, because I'll forget. Okay, so anyway, I've been doing some experiments recently, and anyway, it's awesome. Okay, so memdump, right? So awesome, in fact, it ain't going on a recording. How about that, right? Okay, so we've got memdump. And so, in this case, you know, we're using memdump to dump out all of the memory here. We're able to recover file contents. This is pretty darn interesting, right? So pretty darn interesting. We see in this case that we're grabbing these credit card numbers out, forming as HTML tables. We saw this in bulk extractor. That's pretty cool. How about the Internet Explorer? Well, we can go through and dump all of the Internet Explorer processes as well, dump their memory, and we can actually recover the web page contents that are currently in the web browsers, as well as those that have been accessed since the browser opened, even if in private browsing mode is turned on. Because in private browsing, caches for the session, right, or private browsing caches for the session, and then deletes when you close the process. This is a huge, huge win. Good question.
What's the difference? I use volatility a little bit. What's the difference between the memdump array and proc memdump and proc memdump?
That's a great question. So in this case, we're dumping the entire memory. Memdump is dumping the entire memory space, right? The entire memory space for the process. That includes all the executables, all the DLLs, all the heap segments, all the stack segments, everything for the process. This is really what I want. Proc.exe.dump, right? Proc.exe.dump will dump out an executable, and it'll realign it according to the PE, right? So according to the PE header, it'll actually realign it the way that it would have been originally on disk. Proc memdump, which is different than memdump, by the way. Proc memdump will dump only the executable, but makes no attempt whatsoever to realign it according to the PE header spec. And so there are times when you want both of those. Right? So that's the difference. Those are the three different plugins.
Yeah, see, I thought proc memdump dumped instead it dumped the slack space, and I misinterpreted that. That's what I did.
Okay, well, they're technically correct. They are dumping slack space. But what they mean is they're not trying, by slack space, what they mean is that they're not trying to realign the file the way it was originally found on disk. So, yep. Okay, so in this case here, again, we're dumping all of these Internet Explorer process memories. In fact, we're going to go carve for images. We see a Twitter image. We see some other PNGs. I've done this before, and I've seen some images that I wish I could. I mean, if there was a toothbrush for your brain, I'd be using it, right? So, just want to throw that out there that there are definitely opportunities here to see some stuff you don't want to see, right? How about the open files? Well, we can go through and find, and this is actually pretty interesting here. With this file scan, I actually find good evidence for this, even after a user. For instance, let's say I have a user that plugs in their USB drive and then pulls it out, and we don't have access to that encrypted USB drive anymore. With file scan, if the files were opened, Not if they were just sitting there, but if they were open, we may still be able to recover those even though the drive is long gone. Right? So look, hibernation files, crazy lucrative source. Crazy lucrative source for evidence. Great for doing forensics. Great for finding those little golden nuggets. Right? Those little golden nuggets, as it were, as we're working through a pen test. But look, I mean, if no hibernation files are present, use WinPmem, right? Take a live memory capture and parse it on the target. You don't want to bring that thing home, man. Sometimes that's 3, 4, 8 gigs, right? Parse it out there on the target. Bring your data home, right? We can use Volatility as a standalone executable. You can get into volume shadow copy, right? Sometimes you got 7, 8, 10 of those things hanging out, right? That's a ton of data. It's a ton of data. It's crazy lucrative, right? That's all I've got. Any questions? Sir?
No, it's obvious that you can get a lot of data out of a Windows machine. What about Mac and Linux systems?
Oh, absolutely. Mac and Linux systems. The question was, great, you get a lot from Windows. Am I safe because I use a Mac? And I know that Apple wants you to think differently, but the answer is no, you're not safe by using a Mac. Without a doubt, we don't have hibernation files explicitly on the Mac, but again, you do save state, and we are able to pull an amazing amount of data out of the Mac. I would even go so far as to say that because the source for a larger number of the Mac, Mac programs is well known and well understood, we're actually able to get better data from a Mac than we are from a Windows machine. I hit Windows because I was talking about spying on employees, and nobody issues their employees Macs. So, and nobody issues their employees Linux machines, right? Any other questions? I was told I have like 2 shirts to give away for awesome questions. So I guess I'll ask you, would you like an XL or oh, 1 shirt to give away? I apologize. An XL or a large?
Large.
Large? There we go. So I apologize if I had 2. Well, there we go. It's all confusion, right? Here we are. Thank you, sir, for the awesome question about Macs, right? I can tell you're an Apple fan. Okay, so look, again, that's all I've got. I really appreciate your time. I apologize this wasn't like a hardcore red team talk. I swear when I submitted this, I thought I was in the blue team, and I think I got moved, right? But that's okay.
How about the demo?
What demo?
The demo you were going to do in the video.
Oh, it wasn't so much of a demo thing, but